Early Reader. Horrid Henry's Haunted House. Francesca Simon. Chapter 1. No way, shrieked Horrid Henry. He was not staying the weekend with his slimy cousin Stuck-up Steve, and that was that. He sat in the back seat of the car with his arms folded. Yes, you are, said Mom. Steve can't wait to see you, said Dad. This was not exactly true. After Henry has sprayed Steve with green goo last Christmas and helped himself to a few of Steve's presents, Steve had sworn revenge. Under the circumstances, Henry thought it would be a good idea to keep out of Steve's way. And now Mom had arranged for him to spend the weekend while she and Dad went off on their own. Perfect Peter was staying with Tidy Tad and he was stuck with Steve. It's a great chance for you boys to become good friends, Mom said. Steve is a very nice boy. Chapter 2. I feel sick, said Henry, coughing. Stop faking, said Mom. You were well enough to play football all morning. I'm too tired, said Henry, yawning. I'm sure you'll get plenty of rest at Aunt Ruby's, said Dad firmly. I'm not going, howled Henry. Mom and Dad took Henry by the arms, dragged him to rich Aunt Ruby's door, and rang the bell. The massive door opened immediately. Welcome, Henry, said rich Aunt Ruby, giving him a great smacking kiss. Henry, how lovely to see you, said Stuck-up Steve sweetly. That's a very nice second-hand jumper you're wearing. Hush, Steve, said rich Aunt Ruby. I think Henry looks very smart. Henry glared at Steve. Thank goodness he'd remembered his goose shooter. He had a feeling he might need it. Chapter 3. Goodbye, Henry, said Mom. Be good. Ruby, thank you so much for having him. Our pleasure, lied Aunt Ruby. The great door closed. Henry was alone in the house with his archenemy. Henry looked grimly at Steve. What a horrible boy, he thought. Steve looked grimly at Henry. What a horrible boy, he thought. Why don't you both go upstairs and play in Steve's room till supper's ready, said Aunt Ruby. I'll show Henry where he's sleeping first, said Steve. Good idea, said Aunt Ruby. Reluctantly, Henry followed his cousin up the wide staircase. I bet you're scared of the dark, said Steve. Course I'm not, said Henry. That's good, said Steve. This is my room, he added, opening the door to an enormous bedroom. Horrid Henry stared longingly at the shelves filled to bursting with zillions of toys and games. Of course all my toys are brand new. Don't you dare touch anything, hissed Steve. They're all mine and only I can play with them. Henry scowled. When he was king he'd use Steve's head for target practice. They continued all the way to the top. Goodness, this old house was big, thought Henry. Steve opened the door to a large attic bedroom with brand new pink and blue flowered wallpaper, a 4-poster bed, an enormous polished wood wardrobe, and 2 large windows. You're in the haunted room, said Steve casually. Great, said Henry. I love ghosts. It would take more than a silly ghost to frighten him. Don't believe me if you don't want to, said Steve. Just don't blame me when the ghost starts wailing. You're nothing but a big fat liar, said Henry. He was sure Steve was lying. He was absolutely sure Steve was lying. He was 1,000,000% sure that Steve was lying. He's just trying to pay me back for Christmas, thought Henry. Steve shrugged. Suit yourself. See that stain on the carpet? Henry looked down at something brownish. That's where the ghost vaporized. whispered Steve. Of course, if you're too scared to sleep here. Henry would rather have walked on hot coals than admit being scared to Steve. He yawned, as if he'd never heard anything so boring. I'm looking forward to meeting the ghost, said Henry. Good, said Steve. Supper, boys, called Aunt Ruby. Chapter 4. Henry lay in bed. Somehow he'd survived the dreadful meal and stuck up Steve's bragging about his expensive clothes, toys, and trainers. Now here he was, alone in the attic at the top of the house. He jumped into bed, carefully avoiding the faded brown patch on the floor. He was sure it was just spilled cola or something, but just in case. Henry looked around him. The only thing he didn't like was the huge wardrobe opposite the bed. It loomed up in the darkness at him. You could hide a body in that wardrobe, thought Henry, then rather wished he hadn't. Ooh. Henry stiffened. Had he just imagined the sound of someone moaning? Silence. Nothing, thought Henry, snuggling down under the covers. Just the wind. Ooh. This time the moaning was a fraction louder. The hairs on Henry's neck stood up. He gripped the sheets tightly. Ha-ah-ha-ha. Henry sat up. Ha-ah-ha-ha. The ghostly breathy moaning sound was not coming from outside. It appeared to be coming from inside the giant wardrobe. Quickly, Henry switched on the bedroom light. What am I going to do? Thought Henry. He wanted to run screaming to his aunt. But the truth was, Henry was too frightened to move. Some dreadful moaning thing was inside the wardrobe, just waiting to get him. And then Horrid Henry remembered who he was. Leader of a pirate gang. Afraid of nothing except injections. I'll just get up and check inside that wardrobe, he thought. Am I a man or a mouse?